It was the morning of December 1st, 1943. Over the cold skies of Italy, hundreds of Allied bombers droned north toward Germany. Among them flew a B-24 Liberator, nicknamed Hot Stuff, of the 44th Bomb Group, a heavy engine beast, built to rain destruction deep into enemy territory. At the controls sat Lieutenant Howard "Doc" Hansen, known among his men for calm precision and quiet confidence. Beside him, his co-pilot John Griffith, younger but already hardened by war, handled the instruments. The crew of 10 had done missions like this before. The rattle of the fuselage, the vibration of engines, all had become the sound of routine survival. As dawn broke, Hot Stuff joined formation, climbing through the haze. The mission was simple: strike a key industrial hub inside Germany. But as they crossed enemy lines, the sky erupted in fire. Black puffs of flak burst all around. The air shuddered with explosions. Inside, orders shouted through the intercom were drowned by the roar of engines. Tracers arced through the clouds. Then, a single burst of flak ripped through the cockpit window. A jagged shard of metal slammed into Hansen's chest. He didn't cry out. He simply slumped forward, blood splattering across the glass. The bomber lurched violently, nosing down. Griffith grabbed the yoke, fighting the spin, but the controls felt locked. Smoke filled the cockpit. Sparks danced from shattered wires. For a moment, it seemed the mission and their lives were over. Then, miraculously, Hot Stuff leveled. The weight of Hansen's lifeless body still strapped in place, pressed against the controls just enough to steady the aircraft. The engines roared back to rhythm. Against all logic, the B-24 held course, flying straight and level, as if guided by unseen hands. The intercom was dead. The crew, half-choked by smoke, tried to fight fires and patch fuel leaks. Griffith called out, but received no answer. The cockpit door was jammed shut. He could barely see through the haze, but through the side glass he saw the ground spinning far below. Believing the plane doomed, he shouted for the men to bail out. One by one, they did. Parachutes opened against the gray sky as Hot Stuff drifted downward, yet somehow it never crashed. The bomber stabilized again and continued south, disappearing into the clouds. Hours passed. Alone in the sky, the aircraft crossed back over the Adriatic. Radar operators at an Allied base near Bari, Italy, detected a slow, silent echo. No radio response, no identification, just a lonely signal. Ground crews rushed to the runway as a silhouette appeared through the fog. A B-24 approached, its landing gear down, one engine trailing smoke. The alignment was nearly perfect. The plane touched down hard but steady, skidding across the tarmac. Sparks flying until it came to rest just short of the control tower. The engines continued to hum for several seconds, then died into silence. Soldiers surrounded the bomber, waiting for someone to emerge. No one did. When they climbed aboard, the air was thick with the smell of oil and burnt metal. Blood stained the cockpit. Hansen was still there, hands on the controls, eyes closed, as if asleep. The rest of the crew, gone. The flight log showed Hot Stuff had traveled almost 300 miles, crossing mountains and sea before landing perfectly on its own. Those who witnessed it stood speechless. Somehow, the bomber had brought itself home with its pilot already dead. The scene at Bari Air Base that evening was something no one could quite believe. Mechanics and officers circled the silent B-24, its metal skin scorched and pitted with flak damage, its propellers ticking softly as they cooled in the winter air. Lieutenant Hansen's body was still strapped into the pilot's seat, the safety harness locked. Blood had dried across his uniform, and the control yoke bore the imprint of his hands. The medical officer confirmed what everyone feared. Hansen had been dead for hours before the landing. But how had the bomber flown itself home? The control cables were severed, the intercom destroyed, and one engine completely offline. The flight engineer who examined it whispered, "This plane shouldn't even be in the air, let alone landed like this." An official investigation began immediately. Intelligence officers suspected a navigational miracle or something stranger. They noted that the fuel gauges showed barely enough left for the final minutes of flight. The automatic pilot system was damaged beyond operation. Even if it hadn't been, it couldn't have performed a landing like that. No one could explain it. Witnesses described how the bomber had approached the runway almost gracefully, descending as though a trained pilot guided it. It flared slightly before touchdown, the exact maneuver Hansen had been known for. Some of the crewmen who had bailed out earlier were found days later behind Allied lines. Each told the same story. The plane was gone when we looked up. Smoke everywhere. We thought it exploded. There's no way it made it back. Yet there it was, resting quietly, engines cooling, mission complete. As word spread, soldiers began calling it the ghost bomber. Newspapers would never print the full story. But within the air bases, whispers spread like wildfire. Pilots swapped tales in the mess halls that the spirit of Hansen had refused to let his crew die. That he guided the bomber home through sheer will. Mechanics who inspected the plane swore they sometimes heard faint tapping inside the cockpit at night, as if tools were being moved or switches flicked. One guard refused to go near it after claiming the propellers turned slightly on their own. Eventually, the higher command ordered hot stuff to be dismantled for study. As technicians removed panels, they found one eerie detail. Hansen's flight gloves were melted into the yoke, fused by blood and heat. It looked as if his hands had never left the controls. Before the aircraft was shipped away, the surviving crew came to see it one last time. They stood silently around the bomber that had defied logic, each man feeling something sacred had happened. One of them murmured, "He brought us home. I don't care what they say." The investigator, a hardened colonel who'd seen countless crashes, wrote in his final report, "There is no mechanical explanation for this flight. The aircraft behaved as though under human control, despite the pilot's confirmed death. Recommend no public dissemination." And with that, the file was closed, stamped, classified. Weeks passed after the incident, but the story of the ghost bomber refused to fade. Word spread from Italy to England, retold in barracks and airfields with awe and disbelief. Mechanics swore the aircraft had flown as if guided by invisible hands. Pilots discussed it in hushed voices late at night, some calling it superstition, others something divine. Lieutenant Howard Hansen became a quiet legend. His photograph, a young man smiling in his 20s, was pinned on briefing room boards. Beneath it, someone had written in pencil, "He brought her home." No one ever erased it. To those who had flown with him, Hansen was calm, disciplined, and precise. He once told his crew, "A pilot's first duty is to bring his plane back, no matter what." And somehow, even in death, he had done exactly that. The B-24 hot stuff was eventually towed to a remote hangar. Engineers studied every inch of it, searching for logic in the impossible. Every wire, control, and gauge was examined, but nothing explained the miracle. The instruments were normal. The control systems fully functional. The only oddity, the autopilot gyro had jammed into a perfect level position, perhaps steadying the aircraft long enough to make its final approach. Yet deep down, no one believed mere mechanics could tell the full story. Many who stepped inside the silent fuselage said it felt alive, like something unseen lingered in the metal. In time, the bomber was dismantled. Its wings repaired another Liberator. Its engines were fitted into a training plane. But to those who'd worked on it, the parts felt different, as if they carried a memory. Months later, the surviving crew were reassigned across Europe. The war pressed on, but none ever forgot that winter morning. Co-pilot John Griffith, who had bailed out before the return, flew many more missions, yet admitted that every time his hands touched a control yoke, he imagined Hansen's frozen around it. Years later, he told his grandson, "No pilot ever truly flies alone. Something unseen always guides us." The official report described it clinically as an instance of autopilot-assisted flight recovery under extraordinary conditions. But those who had been there knew it wasn't just a machine's reflex. It was something sacred. Amid a war that devoured men and metal daily, one bomber had defied death to find its way home. After the war, the name Hot Stuff occasionally resurfaced in veteran newsletters. The plane that flew with its pilot dead. One retired engineer recalled standing by the cooling aircraft, hearing only the faint ticking of metal and realizing he'd witnessed something that shouldn't have been possible. "It was the quietest sound I ever heard," he said. "The sound of a machine resting after doing the impossible." Decades later, historians revisiting Air Force archives found the original maintenance logs. Next to Hansen's name was a faint, handwritten note. "Returned safely. Pilot deceased." No one ever discovered who wrote it, but it summed up the mystery perfectly. In 1960, the nearby Italian village erected a small memorial to Allied airmen who died in the region. Among the names carved into marble was L.T. Howard A. Hansen. Locals noticed flowers always appeared beneath his name more often than any other. When children asked why, the elders simply said, "Because he found his way home." As years turned to decades, the story blurred the line between fact and faith. Engineers debated probabilities, pilots debated miracles, but no explanation ever captured what truly happened. By the turn of the century, only a few men who had known Hansen remained alive. When asked about him, they didn't speak of tactics or machines. They spoke of spirit. "In the skies of war," one said, "there are moments no science can explain. Times when courage lingers even after life ends." The B-24 that flew home with its pilot dead became more than a wartime story. It became a symbol of devotion. Proof that sometimes the will to return home is stronger than the limits of life itself.